Okay, well, seeing that it's five after, I'm happy to start with just some housekeeping and technical instructions for you all before we kick this webinar off. Hi everyone, my name is Caitlin O'Donnell. I work on the Talwar Network team, and I've been part of the organizing team for the webinar series, and we're so excited to dive in. But before we start, we wanted to give folks just a few reminders. First, we wanted to let people know that this webinar is being recorded and will be made available for future audiences on the Talwar Network website. So if you preferred not to appear in the recording, please just keep your camera off and refrain from sharing any identifying information in the chat. We also wanted to mention that we have several accessibility features available to ensure everyone's full participation today. We have spoken language interpretation available in Spanish, as well as in sign language, American Sign Language interpretation. To access both of these services, you can look towards the bottom of your Zoom screen. You should see a globe that's labeled interpretation. And if you are on a mobile device or a smaller screen, three dots should appear towards the bottom of your Zoom screen to show you some additional Zoom features for you to access. You can access the interpretation and select either Spanish or sign language, and those will be available. We also have live transcription and closed captioning available if that would be helpful for you to read along the closed captioning as you're viewing the presentation. We're going to remind folks to stay muted while the presentations are going on and participate, add your questions and thoughts into the chat. We will have an opportunity for us to break out into smaller discussion groups later on in the presentation. So that'll be coming, and that'll be a chance for people to have a smaller group discussion. If you are requiring or if you are preferring to keep the interpretation services, we ask that you stay in the main room, and we'll have a smaller breakout room here in the main room where we can still access those interpretation services. And finally, we just wanted to remind people that this is an environment where we're fostering respectful and professional exchange. And so if there are any instances or issues that come up, please just note that the facilitators and our webinar team will address any inappropriate comments accordingly. So, and if there are any issues, please feel free to message me. We have our colleague Belina on the call. And Cameron as well. Direct message any one of us, and we can answer any of your questions or address your concerns. But with that, I'll turn things over to Laureline Hoyt, our Executive Director of the Talwar Network, to officially kick us off. Over to you, Laureline.
Thank you so much, Caitlin, for a beautiful orientation for all of us. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It is an honor to be with you now. I greet you with a very warm welcome to the first of the Talwar Network's six-part webinar series entitled Youth-Led Conversations on Conscious Leadership and Global Solidarity. And importantly, the series was designed and organized by young leaders around the world. So as we gather virtually and miraculously across borders and cultures and lived experiences, allow me to begin with a provocation, a question that is intended to spark your curiosity, intended to spark reflection and even perhaps action on your part. And before the question, I just want to provide some shared context briefly. We are all experiencing a period of profound transformation globally, from climate emergency to global displacement, from widening inequality to disinformation and social unrest. The world is replete with challenges that are complex, overlapping, and urgent. And so within that context, here's the question for you to ponder. What kind of leadership does this moment call for, and how might we build it together? I am just delighted to see all of the young leaders in this virtual room right here, right now. And I know from firsthand experience that they are not bystanders in this moment. They're not just witnesses to crisis. They are indeed catalysts for change. And it's also true that they cannot do the work alone. And so together, they have created and are actively growing the For Youth by Youth movement. And I will tell those of you who do not know yet that it is a beacon of hope and light in these darker times. And for a little bit of background, the For Youth by Youth movement was conceived of by 36 university students in 18 countries who met on Zoom during the global COVID-19 pandemic. So during a very challenging time. And these 36 strangers in 18 countries over a period of a few years created a space for inquiry and action and belonging. And I would go as far as to suggest that they are all conscious leaders, and they have very successfully created a vision for change together. And then they pitched it to one of the world's largest philanthropies. And here we are today, implementing in a very formal and official way a well-funded movement. And so just 2 weeks ago, these same leaders held a 2-day virtual orientation to welcome 50 new university students, many of whom are here. So shout out to our new friends and family members. And thank you to others who are joining us. I see some new friends. I see some friends I've known for a long time. And indeed, we've got momentum and we are moving forward. So again, I invite you to hold this question: what kind of leadership does this moment call for, and how might we build it together? Over the next 6 sessions of the webinar series, you'll be invited to listen deeply, to connect across difference, and to deepen your own knowledge and practice of conscious leadership. And you'll also be invited to move into breakout rooms for discussion and to participate in the practice of building solidarity. So that's what we're up to. And we hope you'll spread the word by inviting your colleagues to join future webinars and to join our growing movement. So in closing, I'd like to call upon the natural world to say that building a global movement takes more than vision. It takes more than enthusiasm. It takes the patience of gardeners who know that change grows slowly from the roots. It takes the resilience of wild grasses that bend but do not break. It takes the strength and power of rivers that gather from many streams and that move in a singular direction. And it takes the wisdom of land that connects all of us and connects life and reminds us of our own liberation and what is possible. So to take us forward into this webinar, I am humbled to hand the mic to Cameron, a brilliant student leader, a dear friend of mine, one of the most wonderful humans on planet Earth, who's at the heart of this movement, someone who embodies the principles of conscious leadership and brings a powerful voice to the movement. So it's all yours, Cameron.
Thank you, Darlene, and thank you for your kind words. And I think I don't need to introduce myself now, but thank you so much for that. And thank you for setting the scene for what we're going to discuss and the objectives behind why we think these conversations are really important. Folks, as I share my screen, which will take us through a few slides that we have around conscious leadership, I'm conscious that sometimes people get a bit anxious or nervous about what a webinar series might entail. So I just want to very briefly give you a rundown of what will happen over the next hour and a bit, so that you're a bit more grounded in the conversation and how we're going to work. My name is Cameron. I'm the Learning Engagement Specialist for the For Youth by Youth Network and movement. And I'm based in Ireland in the very west of Europe. So I'm trying my best to talk slowly because Irish people talk really fast all the time. I've been a long time activist, and as Lurleen likes to call me, a long time radical, working in the area of healthcare reform, healthcare change, and also looking very heavily at LGBT plus rights across Europe. And in my work, I do some of that. I'm going to take us through a couple of slides just to ground us in the conversation around conscious leadership. We then have a wonderful panel made up of Dr. Gardner, Abdirahman, Dua, and William, who will share their insights about what they think and how they've embodied or experienced conscious leadership in the context of youth and youth movement and in the work that they do. After that, we'll have a couple of questions, myself and the panel, back and forth, a little bit of a conversation. And then it's really over to yourselves. We're going to move you into breakout rooms with one of the panelists. It's a little bit of a lucky dip, a little bit of a lottery, you might think, in terms of which group you'll end up with. But you will have one of the panelists in your breakout room to ensure that you can have a back and forth discussion. And that's a space for you to ask questions, to make comments, to talk to each other. We want this to be a space where you can collaborate, connect and grow together, and to find that connection within the youth movement and within the work that you're all doing. We'll then come back, we'll have a little bit of a close and next steps, and then we'll have one task for everyone to do, which is a feedback and impact form that our colleague John will take us through at the end of the webinar series. So that's the agenda for today. That's how we're going to move through the next hour or so. Any questions at any point, you can put them into the chat. You can message one of us back and forth. We're happy to support in any way possible. So to kick us off, as we said, this is the Conscious Leadership Building Global Solidarity webinar series. But when we talk about conscious leadership, what do we actually mean? What do we think conscious leadership is? And from talking to some of the people in the movement, the newer cohort, the old cohort, and colleagues around the world, we kind of think of it as this leading with awareness, empathy, and purpose. So we're not leading just for ourselves, we're leading for change in society. We don't see ourselves as the sole player in what we're doing and what we're trying to achieve. We recognize that it's not just about what I want to do. So I might have a viewpoint about what we should do in healthcare reform, but how and why do I want to do that? And does that reflect the experiences of others in my community? And am I taking into account what others might be going through? And am I seeing this through one lens or multiple lenses? We tend to think of conscious leadership as focusing on collective and communal well-being, equity and sustainability and our impact. How do we work together and leverage all the resources, skills, impact and voices within the community to collectively call for change and to collectively call for new communities and new ways of doing things? And our job as young leaders is to make sure that we facilitate that conversation. So how do we facilitate collective action? And I really like this quote from Brene Brown that talks about daring leaders work to make sure people can be themselves and have a sense of belonging. And I think that's really what we're trying to create as leaders. When people can be themselves and have a sense of belonging to a space, they're more often open to sharing their voices, sharing their ideas, and sharing their collective thoughts on how a movement can work. So we have a responsibility as leaders to create that sense of environment. In this movement, we focus on young people. And why do we focus on young people? I mean, I'm a young person. I think that I want to be heard. I think that's the basic of it, is we want to be heard and have our voices. But it is recognizing that we bring fresh perspectives, bold ideas, and most importantly, we bring lived experiences. Lurleen mentioned that we're living in a world of complete overwhelmness right now that young people are living through. So how does that impact the policies, decisions, and movements that we create? It's deeply connected to the emerging issues that we've talked about: climate justice, equality, disability rights, mental health, etc. It also allows us to challenge outdated norms. I think all of us can identify one or more policies in our community, in our local government, in our local structures that's outdated and doesn't really reflect how we live in the world today. And we also have the space to reimagine leadership and to think of it in a new way, to think of it as this collective leadership, that not me, myself, and I'm not the only thing that can change the world. That actually, when we think about it from a we perspective, a collective perspective, that actually we can achieve more. And we've shaped history. We youth-led movements have shaped history across the world, from civic engagement to climate strikes to the work that myself and others were really privileged and honored to be a part of to create the For Youth by Youth movement. So we're doing things already, we're creating history, and it's about making sure that we have a spotlight for that as well. When we talk about conscious leadership, there's a couple of elements that are I think, completely essential in terms of how we live our lives and what we bring to leadership. We need to be authentic, which lots of people in the new For Youth by Youth cohort talked about, authenticity. How do we bring our lived experience and ideas to the conversation? And how do we do that in an authentic way that doesn't create a huge sense of burden or vulnerability? Empathy. We may not necessarily be able to fully understand what others in our communities and other communities go through, but we can empathize. We can try to understand the impact that that has on them, and we can make sure to build inclusion into the work that we do. Being a conscious leader, it does take courage and accountability. It's called speaking up even when it's uncomfortable to do so, even when you may not necessarily think it's the right thing to do, speaking up even when it's hard. Lurleen and I and others have had conversations about how speaking up can create a different environment, how what you think in your mind, other people are also probably thinking about, and that maybe you're the person that can take that first step to have that conversation. But it does take courage, and that's something that we work on. We're not always courageous every single day, but every day that you are courageous is another day that you can speak up when things are hard. It's about systems thinking, and it's about collaboration. We have to work with communities, not for them. We can't decide what a community in Uganda needs if we don't live in the community in Uganda, just as much as you can't decide what a community in rural Ireland needs without living in a community in rural Ireland. That lived experience and working with those impacted by the problems that you're trying to solve is really, really important. It's not about being a leader that decides what happens. It's about a leader who listens to what needs to be done. Moving beyond tokenism, ensuring that we have spaces that aren't just tokenistic. So we know that young people are often invited to speak, but not necessarily to lead. Conscious leadership, as I said, includes challenging and changing the status quo. Co-creation, and if you take nothing away from this, I want you to think about this sentence. Co-creation is better than consultation. It's not about having just consultations and taking what people are saying. It's about ensuring that they're embedded in the process as well from start to finish. You co-create solutions with communities. You don't consultate communities and then create a solution that works for you and maybe doesn't work for that community. We must invest in capacity, trust building, and shared decisions. And I really like the sentence that young people need platforms and resources. We don't need to be applauded for being courageous or brave or outspoken. We need the resources that back up that applause and back up that conversation that people have. And lastly, and then I will hand you over to the panel, is to talk about reflection and action. We must have a mindset and a practice that is looking at starting at where you are. You don't necessarily have everything to be a conscious leader from day one, but you have something to start that journey. Leading in your community, schools, or online spaces, building networks of support and solidarity like we're trying to do here. And one thing I like to do quite often is to reflect regularly. Am I leading with purpose, empathy, and justice? Or is that falling to the side? Do I need to change some of my practices? What am I uncomfortable with about my leadership right now? What's working well with my leadership? And how do I invest in supporting that? And I'll finish with, it's not about being perfect. Not a single one of us on this call is perfect or will be perfect, but it is about being present. It is about being vocal. It is about being committed, which is what this movement is trying to create space for you to do. So enough of me talking at all of you with these slides. That was just to give you a sense of where we're at right now in terms of conscious leadership. But I would like for us to hand over to our wonderful panel. As I said, we've got Dr. Gardner, we've got Adibur, we've got Dua, and we have William. So first up to speak for us is going to be Dr. Gardner. And Dr. Gardner is a mindset expert, emotional intelligence trainer, and a lecturer. He blends African wisdom, emotional intelligence, and systems thinking to inspire purpose-driven leadership across East Africa, awakening individuals and institutions to exploit their full potential. So, Dr. Gardner, over to you. Excited to hear what you have to share with us. I'm just saying, Dr. Gardner, are you able to hear us? I can see that you're still on the call, but I'm not sure if your Wi-Fi connection is working. So whilst you maybe figure that out, and I'll message you in the chat. If
Okay.
Abdiram, oh wait, perfect, just in time.
Yeah.
Are you able to hear us okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Amazing.
I can hear you.
Over to you to share your insights with us on conscious leadership.
Okay. Right. All right. Thank you, Cameron, and the hosts and the organizers. I'm privileged to be on call. And from your insights, I think you've just nailed what I was supposed to discuss. But picking up from where you stopped, you talked about three things that really resonated with my understanding. You talked about authenticity, you talked about resourcefulness and mindset. And I think that's what conscious leadership, among the many things it entails. That to tell our audience that the world today does not need men and women in suits. We need people that are conscious of who they are, where we derive the word consciousness, right? The two words con and shares. Con means with, shares means the knowledge that you, so your own personal knowledge about thyself. That's what the Greek understood best. Then the second is the consciousness or the awareness of your environment. And then the awareness of the people you're in charge of or the people that you lead. So these three aspects will guide my whole discussion today about conscious leadership. So thinking about conscious leadership, I don't want people to think I've brought candles and incense. We're going to sit in crossed legs to get into meditation. No, I've not brought that. I've not brought crystals or to teach about chakras. We're going to talk about conscious leadership. And my whole discussion is going to be aligned onto a lighthouse. We are here today listening to conscious leadership and the other discussions that are going to come up. I want us to keep in mind that each and every one of us on call is a lighthouse. And the lighthouse does not go out chasing the ship. A lighthouse does not panic. Whether thunder comes or the storm comes or the waves are hard, no. A lighthouse just stands. It stands calmly, it stands still, and shares its own light that it has to the ship that is coming before it. And the ship here is our home, our characters, our attitudes, our values, our morals as leaders. And this is what differentiates us from any other leadership style that we have today. Because remember, we said the world needs conscious leaders. And conscious leaders we can't say they don't have the fear. They have the fear, but they are able to face the fear. The noise is there. The world today, we know we're exposed to over 30,000 adverts in less than a minute each person. We know that we have our own ego, the one that tells us you can do that, you can do better, or you're better than the other, and that brings in the competition. But for us to be able to lead, we have to lead with awareness, we have to lead with purpose, we have to lead with intelligence. This is what Daniel Goleman knows best, and I'll discuss about it as we move forward about emotional intelligence and how it helps us become who we are supposed to be. So 15 years ago, I had a mentor who re-echoed this that I started my conversation with. He told me, Gardner, you know what? You're going to go out in this world, but I want to remind you that the world does not need men in suits. It needs men or women who are conscious, who have purpose, who have the one thing that they're willing to die for. And this is the question I want to ask the audience today. What do you have? And what is there for you that you are willing to die for? I do not know, but the answer lies in conscious leadership as we're discussing. Because if we are able to have that leadership within us, then we are able to transform, not just to transform ourselves, but to transform even the people that are around us, the people that come in touch with us, to transform even the people that hear us at one point in time. I can bring you up to speed in terms of statistics. In 2023, Detroit Global Research found that over 70% of the Gen Zs and the millennials wish to work for organizations that care for people, that care for the planet, and not just making profits. But that's not surprising. They also come to know that 4 out of 10 of youth rejected jobs that did not align with one, caring for people and caring for the planet. And this means that young people out there care. They do care, but they're never prepared. Now, the question we have to understand is, before we become conscious, what is the preparation? Now, the preparation still comes from us understanding that we don't have a leadership gap. We have a conscious gap. And this is what differentiates us. When we come to talk about consciousness, we're talking about the things that we do the things that we do behind in the dark that many people do not understand or could not see, but they're able to see the fruits. And I will tell you that we have read a prototype, because I know we are human beings and we need prototypes of which we can work with. If you come back to my neighboring country, I'm from Uganda, Kenya, we have a lady called Wangai Maathai. I'm very sure many of you may have heard about her. This was the first African to win a Peace Nobel Prize. She did not command an army. All she did was to plant trees. And this is what we call eco-consciousness. She had understood. The second principle I talked about, consciousness about your environment. She had understood that actually to become a leader don't necessarily mean to lead people. You can lead in your area of gifting. And here, we're talking about the environment. The second person I want to bring us to speed to believe that it actually works is Amanda Gorman. This is from US. She's from here. I'm very sure you know her. During the presidential Biden's inauguration. This is a 22-year-old girl. And she gave a speech that was entitled, "The Will We Climb." I'm very sure you watched it. She did not have a fancy title. She did not have a political position. She just used her voice to create awareness, a voice of truth that moved the world and put her on the table of men. And this is what we're trying to discuss here. Consciousness, being aware of yourself, being aware of your environment, and being aware of those around you or for those that you're in charge of. And this is what we have come to understand, that actually consciousness is everything. Confucius once said that we don't give money, don't give them wealth, don't give them material things. The only thing that we need is consciousness. Because when you have consciousness, you're aware of yourself, you're aware of your environment, and you're aware of the people in charge of you. Now, the question I'm supposed to be answering is, how can I be conscious aware? As I conclude, there are three ways in how to become conscious aware. The first one is you need to know thyself. This is what the Greek understood best. They wrote it on all the temples in Delphi. Know yourself. But that is one wing of the bird. I asked yourself, how many things do you know, but you're not using? So you need to know yourself and be yourself. And knowing yourself means know your fears, know your values, know your morals, know your purpose, know your strength, know your weaknesses. Know the truth that lies within you and be willing to undergo the process, because every one of us here is a seed. And that seed, for it to grow, it needs to be nurtured, needs to be fertilized, it needs to be helped to come out and serve that fruit, which every one of us enjoys. The second is that you need to be a master of your emotional intelligence. Daniel Goleman, in that famous book, Emotional Intelligence, talks about 5 pillars. Talks about self-knowledge, self-management, social skills, motivation, empathy. All these are things that we need as leaders. And Cameron talked about it, the authenticity, which comes from knowing and now managing how your emotions can influence. And this is what we have here, the Bantu tribe of within Africa. They have a quote that he who learns to walk without stepping on thorns masters the path. He who learns to walk without stepping on stones masters the path. This simply means that you have understood your emotions, you can catch yourself, you can manage them, and you're able to relate. And this is what leadership is all about. Empathy, understanding the thoughts, the feelings of the people in charge of. And the third one is that you need to live your purpose. An examined life, Aristotle says, is not worth living. And we know it is not the movement of the wind that determines the destination of the sailors over it. It is the sets. It's the sets of the sail. Now, the set of the sail determines which direction you're to go. Will the wind come? Yes, it will come. Will challenges come? Yes, they will come. But as they push you with a wave, you're able to come back and know where you are and how you can control it and get to your destination. And finally, the last one that I love the most is you need to lead from where you are. It's quite interesting. How do you lead from where you are? We talk about more or less of cooperation. I think it's In this book, The Leader with No Title, Simon Sinek, he says, you don't need a title to lead. And many of us as youth, the titles that we think we can lead, but we forget that there's one point where we are standing. And that's the point we need to start from. And let me tell you, you cannot do it alone. When you look at Martin Luther King, who wrote the famous I Have a Speech Dream, all of us know Martin Luther King, but nobody knows Clarence B. Johnson, who wrote the speech. We all know Martin Luther King, but who wrote the speech? He needed somebody. Nobody knows of Mahalia Jackson, who pushed Martin Luther King and said, tell us about the Harvard Dream. Tell us about that speech. Those are people that helped him become who he is to make the Harvard Dream speech famous. When we talk about Michael Jordan, we all know the 23 number in basketball. This was a legend who won over 6 championships. But nobody talks about Scottie Pippen. Michael Jordan once said that I am not Jordan without Pippen, to an extent that he was his teammate, he was his emotional anchor, but more importantly, he was his powerhouse. And finally, the person we can learn from, Elon Musk, is the current billionaire of the world that we know of, the founder of Tesla. And, you know, he's all over talking about the US politics and his Doge campaign. But nobody talks about J.B. Straubel. J.B. Straubel is the co-founder of Tesla and SpaceX. Actually, he's the man behind the battery house of Tesla. But nobody talks about him. And yet you realize that J.B. Straubel, you realize Scofin Pimpin, you realize Clement Jackson, and Mahalia Jackson and Clement Jones. These are people that have helped these great men. It simply shows you that you cannot be great if you don't have a support system, you don't have people that will push you every time you get down. And that is all we have to remember when we talk about conscious awareness. 1, knowing yourself. 2, living with purpose. 3, leading from where you are, collaborating with people, and most importantly, the use of emotional intelligence to harness that of which you want to do and have in life. Yes. Back to you, Cameron. That's what I thought I would bring out.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gardner. We really appreciate your insights, and I really resonated with some of the things that you were saying about being aware, leading from where you are, and that you cannot do it alone. And I think that's the message we want to send to the For Youth by Youth movement, that you cannot do it alone, but that we are here to support and to create an environment for you to explore and excel and grow within. So thank you so much. Next up, we have Abdirahman Hassan Mohammed, who's a member of the Law Society of Kenya, an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, specializing in commercial transactions and natural resources law. He was a lead facilitator on Demographics Divided at the Youth Pre-Conference of the first Africa Health Agenda International Conference held in Kenya. He was training youth cohorts from 54 African nations, courtesy of his voluntary role with the United Nations Population Fund Youth Advisory Panel. So we're really excited to see what you have to say, Abdirahman, and the stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Cameron. I just to supplement what Cameron's introduction has, and also the entire team about today's leadership webinar. We are speaking about conscious leadership, and I'll start by saying that my name is Abdirahman Hassan. I'm a young lawyer, a youth advocate, and somebody who likes you know, the ability to learn and also build and break barriers in our society. So today I want to speak from the heart and discuss about the kind of leadership the world is desperate about right now. It is not the loudest, it might not be the most powerful kind of leadership, but it is indeed the most intentional form of leadership. So this is what we call conscious leadership. So in my understanding, and I agree with all the panelists and organizers of this meeting, is that conscious leadership is about leading with awareness, empathy, and integrity. It is not clearly about titles or being in charge, or it is about being awake to your purpose and to the impact to the people around you. So in my understanding about conscious leadership, I really want to, you know, talk to the audience and discuss with them about the journey. Every person has an individual journey towards leadership, and everybody must try to understand that leadership the journey starts from you, and you cannot depend on others for you to describe yourself as a conscious leader. You have to build it. You have to take time to understand what it takes to be a conscious leader. And this is a hard call because not everybody is able to fully participate in conscious leadership. We can see around the globe various forms of types of leadership. There is dictatorial, there is, the leadership whereby somebody is more of a political, idol, but not a leader per se. So in my understanding, it is not in my own journey personally as Abdurrahman. I got a privilege to become a student leader at the Mount Kenya University here in Kenya. I have, through that opportunity, I have been able to understand the responsibility and the weight it carries on to become a leader. Leadership is not just about, somebody who has been mandated to go and serve for a term. It's about what you're supposed to do, what are the deliverables, what are the expectations, and how the society is supposed to be changed through that term that you are supposed to be there. In that journey of being a student leader, I engaged quite a lot with young people, and I learned that leadership isn't about ego. That was the most, captivating lesson that I learned about leadership, that it isn't about ego. It's about service. It is not about control. It's about connection. It's not about being perfect. It's about being present. So combined, what we can see from leadership and what comes out clearly from leadership or conscious leadership is the empathy. The empathetical characteristic of conscious leadership must be there for somebody to, attribute himself to conscious leadership. Conscious leadership, as I said, starts with self-awareness, who you are and what you stand for. What are your values when no one is watching? So we assume, for example, for those who believe in the oneness of God, that when you are not being watched, when you're alone, when you're in that room, what is your level of, awareness in terms of what you're doing while you're alone, not while you're in the public? These are questions that guide you when the world tries to change you, and you must know yourself so that you can lead others. That is the basic, that is the basic foundation of conscious leadership. So you have to have some level of self-awareness before you attempt to lead others as well. But it doesn't stop there. For me, conscious leader listens. They listen deeply. And this one, I agree with the facilitators of this meeting that conscious leaders, they do listen. And listening is a very core, pillar of conscious leadership, not just to the people who agree with them, but especially those who challenge them. When you are organizing, for example, a youth forum in your local community, when you're starting a community initiative, or when you're simply showing up for your peers, your ability to empathize is your superpower. So if you are not able to listen, I mean, you have let go on, that superpower that you have, the only capital for conscious leadership, which is, listening and having empathy towards your people. So I will go forward by saying that if we are supposed to be honest about this conversation, we have to all agree that this conversation isn't easy. This conversation is very hard. The world could be noisy, the world could be competitive and even discouraging. You may feel overlooked, underfunded, or underestimated in any of your capacities while you try to practice conscious leadership. Personally, as a young person, I've been there. But that's the truth. Conscious leadership does not wait for permission. Despite all those challenges, it doesn't ask who will let me or who will stop me. We normally say that for young people, you have to be part of the table. You don't need to be invited sometimes at the table. So in my contribution to this, a precious webinar, I will say that you do not need to have a global stage to lead consciously. All you need is clarity, courage, and consistency. Are you lifting others? Are you lifting others as you rise, or you have a one-man journey whereby you're selfishly, gaining progress in your life? Or on the flip side, are you trying to work as a team and create some collaboration to the journeys that you're pursuing? The other question which really lingers on my mind is, are you making decisions that aligns to your values, even when no one is clapping? Globally, we are trying to see a lot of phenomenon that many people are trying to be silent about, but very few, parts of the world are trying to speak up. We can clearly see, a lot of activities that are happening around in Congo, where there is forced labor. You can globally see the instruments of oppression in the state of Palestine. You can clearly see that there are issues of, the backdated racism movements in other parts of the world. So the biggest question to our fellow young audience is that when other people are not clapping, what is on your mind? What are your values? Do you believe in values that can propel you to conscious leadership? So conscious leadership in the end, means recognizing the power of solidarity. I believe that without solidarity, none of us can transform the world alone. But together with compassion, collaboration, and shared sense of responsibility, we can reimagine that which failed us and that which built us, and that we can understand that both the good and the bad serves us all. So to every young person who's listening here today, I say that you are not leaders of tomorrow, and you're leaders of today, and you're leaders of now. Your voice matters now. Your ideas matter now. Your experiences matters now. You lived realities. They belong to the center of change and not the sidelines. I will just try to, take you back maybe to create a nexus between, this discussion to my experience. And I remember that a while ago, I participated in, some activities while I was doing my law school. As a young person, I participated in moot court competitions whereby we went to the United Nations High Commission for Human Rights in Geneva, and we discussed about fundamental matters of climate change, fundamental matters of sovereignty, fundamental, arguments that if you look at it 7 years ago, these are things that affect the global peace and solidarity. And what came out is that the local voices and the global voices are interconnected. The biggest question is, do you have a voice, or have you decided to become silent? In my participation in the non-profit organization whereby I experienced worked directly with USAID funded programs and UNFPA funded programs, I realized that these moments are living proof of solidarity, and that solidarity is in charity. It is a form of partnership. So I clearly understood the nexus between, in institutions, organizations that are coming on board to support solidarity. They are not just doing it in form of charity. They are doing it to create a solid partnership around the world. Central to my experience was an activity that was funded by USAID. We called it Supporting Youth Voices Against CVE. So in the title, you can clearly carry out that, it's about young people, fighting against countering against violent extremism. Here in East Africa, there is a lot of penetration of violent extremist groups, whereby young people at that time, I think it was in 2019, there was some elements of recruitment to such organizations. One thing that came out is that the voices must be properly captured. For young people to come together and stand against one single item that they believe should be fought against, that there must be some level of voices that have to be amplified. So in my conclusion, I would say that I've had a very, very good experience in working with young people. And I believe that the global stage, we can together in our different capacities and in our different platform, we can create voices. Good example is recently in Kenya, we have been having governance issues whereby we saw a lot of Gen Zs coming up around mid last year, whereby they fought against the regime. And a huge audit, a political audit was done, and you could not trace the movement to any political party or any organization or any global institution that was funding it. It was few young people who came up and said enough is enough. Enough is enough to unemployment. Enough is enough for, social insecurities. And they came up together, and the whole country busted into, a moment of activism. In conclusion,
Dearman,
I
I
think
might just apologies, I might just jump in the essence of time. And I think we could
Yes.
all listen all day to the experiences and the work that you've done, and I really appreciate
Yes.
all of the insights that you've given us. I might just pause here so that we can save some of this for the questions and conversations we'll have afterwards and in the breakout session.
Thank you.
But
Thank
I
you
think
so
what you've
much.
said, I think it's resonated with a lot of the folks here, that with solidarity, that's the only way we can transform the world. But what I really liked is your discussion and your prompt on what is on your mind when no one is clapping and what aligns with your morals. So I really, really enjoyed that element of your discussion. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I hope that we'll hear more from you in the panel discussion. Next, our speaker, and apologies, we have to run through some things quite fast as we have a lot of speakers, a lot of insights, and not all day, unfortunately. I think we could spend all day talking about this if we had the time. But next up is Dua Shah, and Dua is the digital engagement specialist for the For Youth by Youth movement. She has worked with organizations such as Amnesty International, Girls' Human Rights Hub, Pakistan Human Rights Ministry, and Gallup, primarily on gender equity, child rights, and educational reform. And she's going to share her insights with us today. So thank you so much, Dua. The stage is yours.
Thanks so much, Cameron. And thank you so much, everyone, for being here. It's so great to see like such a vivid presence of young people. So I'm gonna, especially in the interest of time, I'm gonna try to be, as quick as possible, but also hopefully concrete. So when I think about conscious leadership, especially in the context of, for instance, my personal and professional experiences, as Cameron sort of highlighted as well, like most of the spaces that I've worked or volunteered in have been very like human rights and community service related. And so I think especially in those spaces where, these sorts of discussions are held, it really prompts you to be a lot more reflective about sort of how you exist in a context of community, both local and global. So when I think of conscious leadership, I think, similar to what the previous speakers have said, the first thing that I find really important is being incredibly self-aware. And, even I think conscious leadership isn't actually about the leader. It's about, the person, the community around the leader that they're trying to mobilize. And when it comes to self-awareness, like I would always personally be very, very aware in these different spaces that I would be working in or volunteering with, that this is a privilege, that this is a responsibility, that I'm not in this space because, or I'm not given this, for instance, leadership role because I'm more important or valuable or intelligent or talented than everyone else who, for instance, isn't in the room or on that decision-making table. That it is because I can, speak a certain way or have a certain vocabulary, or I have the privilege of education or, social capital or financial resources that other people in my community don't have. And so their inability to access that room says absolutely nothing about, me or my, supposed talent or intelligence. It actually means that I need to be very aware of this as a privilege and a responsibility, and I need to give back to the community and work with it when it comes to the sort of resources that I then get by being a leader. And I think that, like, so being very, very aware of these sort of the level of privilege that you have in this capacity. And then also being very aware of like the biases that are shaping your thinking, right? So like what institutions, whether it's religious or political, or the media, or what infrastructure has been shaping the way that you've been thinking about, for instance, certain issues or certain communities. And how can you sort of completely debunk those things by going out into the community or into different communities and really being curious, right? Operating from a place of curiosity, not thinking that, oh, like I've heard that this is how things are, and then doing everything on the basis of that assumption. But taking the time to actually listen to the people that you're working with, whether that's your team in an office space or the communities that you're going out and doing project work with, taking the time to get their input, to really understand their reality, because you are not the expert, they're the expert, because they've been living this, right? So even if you're coming in with like a theoretical understanding of things, that will never match up to the level of like lived experience someone else has. And even when you're doing that, you need to be very conscious, or I mean, I always try to be very conscious of, okay, when we're speaking with someone, like what are the different aspects that are shaping their reality, right? Is it gender? Is it disability? Is it like socioeconomic standing? And ensuring that you're talking to a diversity of people, right? So for instance, if you're going into a certain community, not every person is going to be like, there's no such thing as one person representing that entire community, right? You need to talk to a diversity of people to really understand a specific issue or a specific community, and then, you know, go in and incorporate that into your work. And then another thing when it comes to being aware of other people is when you're working with a team, like for instance, in these spaces, I would always try to figure out like what other people's values are, or what their interests or goals are. Why are they committed to, for instance, this profession or this workspace? Why are they interested? It can't just be about, you know, since I'm leading something, it's about my values or my interests or my goals. It has to be collective, and everyone has to be very on board with the work that's being done. And that's a continuous process. That's not just something that you do at the start or you do at the end and you're like, okay, yeah, I, you know, had an assessment of what everyone's interested in, and then like just doing it randomly. But making sure that it's a very active conversation throughout, like, and ensuring that everyone's on board with those things. And then my last 2 points are just sort of, you know, one thing that and this is something that I've sort of fed into my understanding of conscious leadership, is certain things that I've found really frustrating in a lot of both local and global spaces. One thing is that a lot of times, like the support that young people, for instance, will get will be the kind of support that doesn't really make much of a tangible difference, right? So a lot of young people, like for instance, they need financial support, or they need support in very individualized ways, like just, you know, sort of a generic thing, which is on well-being, or for instance, isn't going to cut it, because these people, like everyone is experiencing a lot of different challenges, and they need support that's catered to that. That's what an ideal sort of leadership framework would look like, at least to me. Another thing is that I feel like in a lot of these spaces, we're very like, there's a lot of emphasis on discussion and dialogue and not as much emphasis on action. But a lot of people like that I've worked with or spoken with are usually just very, very invested in, you know, seeing impact. And you have to understand that it is a slow process, but at the same time, like you need to be thinking about, okay, once we're out of this room, once we've made these discussions or had these discussions or made these decisions, where is this conversation going to go? And it has to be something that translates into action, into actual work that you're doing to support the community that you are engaging in dialogue with, or on, you know, engaging in dialogue on issues related to that community. And another thing that I'll just mention, and just my last point, is a lot of times like these spaces can be very performative, and the sort of like, you know, human rights prioritization or well-being prioritization will be very sanitized. And I'm sure you can think of examples, especially given the current global climate, where, you know, certain language is used or certain language is prohibited. And it's really just this prioritization of playing it safe. And it's sort of, and I think conscious leadership is something that needs to stand in opposition to these structures of power, which are inherently very violent. Whereas conscious leadership, in my opinion, is something that contradicts and questions and critiques and completely subverts this sort of oppressive power structure, which, you know, replicates violence in other ways. But conscious leadership needs to be something that does the exact opposite and genuinely empowers young people, especially the young people who are the most affected by these issues. And we need to be very, and I think this is something that other speakers mentioned as well, we need to be very courageous when calling that out, regardless of the consequence. So I'll just sort of end there and pass it back to Cameron.
Thank you so much, Dua. I could listen to what you have to say for hours. I really enjoy the perspective that you give, and I think it's really important to hear from you in terms of what you see in the world and the perspective you have on conscious leadership. And some of the things that are really sticking out to me in terms of, I think we all get frustrated about the lack of translation to action, where there's discussions and nothing happens, where spaces, and I agree with you, spaces can be performative and sanitized and not reflective of people's lived experience. So I think your perspective of conscious leadership standing in opposition to those infrastructures and in opposition to violence, I think is really, really important. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. Folks, the last speaker that we have before we'll have a little bit of a conversation and then we'll move into breakout rooms is William Alosa, who is a highly skilled and diligent counseling psychologist with over 15 years of experience in mental health care. He's passionate about empowering individuals to achieve holistic wellness and emotional resilience. He's a member of the International Society of Substance Use Prevention and Treatment Professionals, reflecting his commitment to advancing mental health standards and advocacy in the East Africa region and beyond. And he continues to make a meaningful impact in the lives of individuals and communities. So, William, this stage is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Cameron. I think I just say good morning, good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are joining us from part of the world. It's an honor to be here with you. I'm aware it's a fast cohort, and you are pioneers setting the stage for what's to come. I wanted to share some insights drawn from my own journey, which I hope will inspire you. So I just ask Cameron so you can go next. So a little bit about me. I'm a counseling psychologist with over 15 years experience in mental health. I've dedicated my career to fostering support environments, empowering individuals to reach their full potential. So it has spanned from the mental health into rehabilitation centers and even now into NGO world as well. So my work has focused on leadership, mental health advocacy, creating spaces where people can thrive. As Cameron has mentioned, I'm a member of the International Society for Substance Use and Prevention and Treatment Professionals. And it just reflects my commitment to advancing mental health standards and advocacy in East Africa region and beyond, because I'm originally from Kenya, but currently working in Rwanda. So some of these experiences have shaped my perspective on leadership, personal growth, making a meaningful impact. Next. I'd broken it down to concrete and inspirational sort of embrace the learning process. Every experience serious, yeah. Ask questions, seek out mentors, because I think we all where we are because of that sort of mentorship we've got, a sort of guidance. And also I'd mentioned, don't be afraid to make mistakes. They are stepping stones to success, because a lot of times people see success, but they don't see the same failure. But for the road to success is paved with failures equally to success. So as part of it, I'd mentioned that the only true failure is a failure to learn. My second point is developing strong relationships. So build genuine connections with your peers, mentors, and community. As a counseling psychologist, it's very important to be able to develop relationships. I deal a lot in terms of healthy relationships, and a lot of it just boils down to being able to connect, being able to have those sort of relationships. Collaboration and teamwork are essential for achieving great things. Support and uplift each other. Your network is your net worth. As part of it, I'd mentioned alone we can do so little, together we can do so much. So just being able to work in collaboration can be able to go a long way. Next. So my third point would be find your passion and purpose. As some of the panelists have also mentioned, just finding a purpose. Identify what truly drives you and aligns your value. Pursue your passions with dedication and perseverance. Yeah. Your purpose will give you the motivation to overcome obstacles, because at the point where you have that vision, you're able to go through whatever obstacles that come your way. Because a lot of it, when looking at it from a point of sensory, a lot of our senses almost like 70-80% senses are geared towards vision. So it's very important able to see it, able to motivate yourself. As part of inspiration, I'd mentioned the two most important days in your life are the day you are born and the day you find out why. And my fourth point would be resilient and adaptable. Life will inevitably throw curveballs. Learn to bounce back. Based on our own experience, we have gone through different challenges. I'm standing here showing him a testament of just being able to be resilient. 15 years ago, as a young boy just joining into the mental health space, there are not so many psychologists in the East African space. But through resilience, being able to find my niche, being able to be adaptable, because as I've said, I found out I've worked in different spaces, mental health and different industries, just being able to be adaptable, being able to show relevance in mental health. And what I'd mentioned is a lot of times there is no health without mental health. So embrace change, be open to new opportunities. Adaptability is key to navigating an ever-evolving world. And I think as one of the founders had mentioned, as part of the inspiration, the oak fought the oak fought the wind and was broken. The willow bent when it must and survives. Next page. So my fifth point would be make a positive impact. So think beyond yourself. Consider how you can contribute to the society. Use your skills, knowledge to make a difference in your community, because a lot of it, what to make the change, be able to look within, be able to use what you already have within you as part of resources. Leave a legacy, positive change, inspiration. We always look at what will I leave beyond my existence. So as part of the inspiration, be the change that you wish to see the world today. And my sixth point would be prioritize self-care. Your well-being is crucial for your success and happiness, because as part of mental wellness, we always champion self-care, because if we don't take care of ourselves, we end up crashing and burning out, and end up not being able to achieve our goals, our dreams. So take time to rest, recharge, pursue activities you enjoy as well as part of balance. Practice mindfulness, maintain a healthy work-life balance, and then be also take care of your body. It's the only place you have to live. Next. So you, the first cohort, have an incredible opportunity to shape the future. Embrace this journey with enthusiasm, determination, a commitment to make a positive impact. Remember lessons I've mentioned to discuss here. Never stop striving to reach and make the change. Thank you. I think next I'll be able to hand it over to this.
Thank you so much, William. That was really, really insightful. I think it was a very nice way to round up the panel discussion. And I think you embodied a lot of what we have discussed today and with the other speakers as well. Something that's just sticking with me since you spoke. Your net worth is your network. And I think that I like rhyme and I like alliteration, but I think it's really important for the movement that we're trying to create within the youth space here, that showing that collaboration and networking connection really leads to positive collective action. I was wondering if we could just spotlight pin all of the panelists. We're running a little bit over time, which is natural for these kind of things. We never run on time when we're having such incredible conversations. But I do want to ask the panel one question before we move into a slightly shorter breakout room where you might have an opportunity to ask more questions. And don't worry, there's going to be plenty of time over the next number of years as this movement builds where you'll have opportunity to interact and ask questions and have these conversations. But to start with, Dua, I might ask you, I'm only going to ask you one question before we jump into the breakout room, so you can all have a think about it and maybe think about a response in a minute or less. I know that's tough if that's possible. But the For Youth by Youth movement, we emphasize youth-led change, and that's really important to us in terms of young people being at the forefront. How do you think we can do a job of making sure that young people aren't just included in decision making, but are empowered to be conscious leaders within their communities, and truly part of the systems that we're trying to change.
Yeah, I think one really important thing that I mean, kind of touched on before as well is, for instance, like speaking from personal experience, the moments when I have felt most empowered, was when I had the space and the ability, to speak my mind. So for instance, not getting penalized or punished for, you know, when I see something, see a specific issue and I have like an opinion about it, being able to talk about it again in a way that isn't sanitized, in a way that doesn't necessarily align with how institutions in the world operate, getting an alternative space where I'm able to be, where I'm able to translate that moral clarity or that sense of moral compass that I have inside, externally. Another thing I feel is very important is having long-term support that, again, isn't just performative, but actually caters to a person's individual needs, whether it's financial or emotional or, even social or political. I think those are two really important things. And then I think another thing is, making sure that young people, they're actually listened to. They're not just like listened to for the sake of, because it's important to listen to young people, but that their voices and knowledge and experiences are very central to the decisions that are being made, particularly if there are financial decisions being made. And I'll, give some room to the other speakers to talk about this now.
Thank you. Chairman, I think from what you were talking about as well in terms of solidarity and creating supports, do you have any insights, you think, on how we ensure that young people are empowered to be conscious leaders and part of the systems that we're trying to change? You're just muted at the minute.
Thank you so much for the assistance. I think there are various means whereby young people can come together to, promote and instill the values of conscious leadership in their day-to-day activities. I believe that the contribution is by and large through, creating or institutionalizing youth leadership. So youth leadership should be taken very seriously. It is an invitation from God. It is not something that you need to take it for granted. Youth leadership is something that somebody decides to come on the table and make a meaningful impact to their communities. Number two, I think that capacity building is very important. As a young person, I think you are tasked to involve yourself in sharpening your knowledge to within the spheres of the society, whereby you are well aware about what is happening in your society, and by that you'll be able to identify solutions, as I think Cameron said earlier on, is co-creation, the ability to co-create and create solutions through a co-creative purpose, and not create solutions for the community. So I think those are the two main things that I believe young people can focus on to promote conscious leadership.
Thank you so much. And William, I wanted to just pull you in terms of, we talked a little bit in your presentation about self-care and taking care of yourself in this world of conscious leadership. As we create movements like the FYBY Youth movement, what are maybe your top 2 tips for young people who are experiencing maybe some burnout or maybe some tough times of being a leader in the world that we currently live in, and how do we build better practices into being a conscious leader around self-care? If you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think you can, man. I think for me, what I'd always say, my motto has always been, there is no health without mental health. A lot of it just boils down to being able to have balance in terms of by having times to things that you enjoy and things that you also get to do work done. So just looking at some of the challenges, I think you had mentioned them, aspects of like tokenism, aspects of even imposter syndrome, self-doubt. Without role models or mentorship, many doubt their capacity to lead and even impact. So even aspects like burnout is normally quite common now in our society. But I've always said, post-COVID, depression, anxiety are quite common, prevalent in our society now. Just by being able to understand depression a lot about focusing a lot on the past, anxiety focusing a lot on the present, So it's very important to just be present, be able to, as part of that presence, be able to understand what you can do and what you cannot do. And then also more importantly, as narrative change, elevate stories of youth-led success, shift perceptions from youth to future leaders as current change makers. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, William. And Dr. Gordon, I wanted to bring you in just before we move to the breakout rooms, in terms of some of the conversation that we were having around this concept of, and following on from what William has just said, that we're all seeds, that we need support, we need to have a space to grow, and we need to be aware. If you had any thoughts in terms of how do we empower young people to be conscious leaders, and how do we empower them to be part of systems, so not just consulted on different decisions or making decisions that doesn't fall into action. How do we empower them to be part of those systems that we want to change, and to co-create that change? If you have any thoughts on that.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much, Cameron. From my side, I've realized that there's a lot of leadership talks. We talk too much. There are conferences, webinars, online now. TikTok has those spaces, SpaceX, but there's too little being done. And now, if we want youth to get involved into leadership, let us give them a platform. We have a space. This Youth for Youth is a very big space. I know you have people that you're mentoring. Today we have, when I looked at the panel, we had over 4 to 5, and the list is endless of the facilitators. If you can pick some and align them with certain mentors and give them those assignments so they can grow from learning is also education, but they bring it into practice. That's the beginning point. But if we keep having the conversations, yes, we are exposed to too much. You know, we can get all the things anywhere, but the difference is, are we able to implement them? Are we able to have them manifest within us so that we can live them and be able to advise? That's all I can say. Back to you, Tom.
Thank you very much. I think that's a nice point to end on before we open up the floor. I think, you know, if we summarize some of the conversation that we've had here, we can't do this alone. Collective action is stronger than individual action. Empathy and leading with understanding is important. Taking courage, consistency, clarity is, another speaker has pointed out, your network is your net worth. Being curious, as Dua has said, I think that's really, really important. To be curious as a young leader, to mind yourself, to understand yourself, and to have space where there's tangible action, so that we move beyond dialogue without action and move to spaces where decisions and action happen. Folks, we're not going to necessarily go into the breakout rooms because we think that we may end up losing time with doing that. So what we're going to facilitate now is that anyone that wishes to ask a question, you can just raise your hand. If you go to the react button on your Zoom screen, you'll see a little hand that says raise hand. You can raise your hand, we can ask you to unmute, and you can ask your question of the panel. You're also more than welcome to share your questions in the chat, and I'm happy to read them out to the panel if anyone wants to jump in. So if there is any questions from the floor, please feel free to raise your hand now, and we can give you an opportunity to unmute and to ask your question of the panel. Okay, so we have Esther. If you can help Esther to unmute. Okay, off you go, Esther.
Thank you, Cameron. Good afternoon, everyone from Ghana. So my question goes to the last speaker about, you know, take care of yourself, get some rest and all of that. So as a young leader, I'll use my current project as a case study, but I'll try to be quick on that. You know, I'm working on a project, and we know that most NGOs, the members we have on our team are volunteers, you know, until we get to a point where we are able to pay them and all of that. But, you know, people are multitasking to support the work that you do. But it gets to a point where, you know, your team members, people are busy with their personal work. And as the leader, you become the project manager, you become, you know, the social media, you become everything. And at the end of the day, you're worn out, you're burnt out. So how do we bridge this gap? Like, how do we, in case of this kind of situation, how do we tackle it so that we don't burn out, but at the same time, we are still able to engage our members if there is a way out of this? Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Esther. William, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Esther, for your question. I think a lot of times it's a challenge I see a lot in terms of doing multiple roles, multiple tasks. But when it comes to people, you also have to understand their different personalities. So just being able to understand your team members, because as a leader, you have to lead from the front. So a lot of times, a leader, I always talk about servant leadership. Just being able to understand what your colleagues are going through, both in office and out of the office, is very important. And just able to avoid burnout is always being able to look at what are some of the priorities. I think having been part of various discussions, just being able to prioritize, being able to look at what are some of the needs, what are some of the wants, what are some of the roles that one can able to delegate. Because if you're a leader and you're micromanaging everybody, definitely you'll find yourself burnt out. But are you able to trust your team? Are you able to allow them to deliver? And just being able to have those moments of check-in, see on how progress is going. And even as part of self-care, having worked in a hospital for more than 10 years, we learned that sometimes getting time for going to gym might be a challenge. So we talk about just using things that are around you, parking the car a bit farther away, using the stairs versus the lift, sort of, and just being able to have those moments of alone time, just being able to use what is around you. I'd also talk about the five senses. We talk about taste, smell, music has also been known to be a key way of just being able to unwind and just being able to let loose. And more importantly, just being able to have importance of work-life balance for yourself and also your work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, William. The next question I'm going to take is from Elle in the chat. That's for you, Adirman. I liked his emphasis on leading with awareness, empathy, and integrity. I wanted him to recommend youth as university students on how they can start leading consciously while embracing academic stress and pressure. So, Adirman, if you have any thoughts on that, feel free to share with us.
Well, thank you so much. I think my thoughts will go to every university student and also to the person who was asked that question. And by saying that navigating through the pressure of academics is one key factor that could discourage you from becoming a conscious leader. But I want to contribute by saying that it has to start now. You don't have to graduate so that you become a conscious leader. You have just to take up the opportunity and take up the mantle and, pursue becoming a conscious leader. Number two, also, by saying that we have to lead with awareness, we mean that you have to know your limits. You don't have to push yourself further. You need to be self-aware. What are the maximum? What are the minimums? You need to understand your graphs. Number three, we say that, empathy begins with passion, and you don't need to be too hard on yourself. You have to also have empathy to your own self. So self-empathy as the person who's participating in conscious leadership is a very, important factor. I think I will also say that integrity plays a key role in as much as you are in a space whereby majority of your time goes to academic. Once you decide to become a conscious leader, you have to, instill some level of integrity so that you can see the gains of conscious leadership. What I will finally say to the audience, specifically the university graduate, is that you need to take small steps. They have to be intentional steps. You volunteer, mentor somebody, join youth initiative, speak up in forums, pick up the mic. It doesn't have to be big. It just has to be, a bit, consistent. Surround yourself with people who also have similar vision to uplift, yourself and also the rest of the team, so as to create change. So finally, I would say, so yes, study hard, but live consciously. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that really reflective and concise practical advice and information from your perspective. We have a couple more minutes, so we may not get to every single question, but Matthew, you are next on the list if you want to unmute and ask your question to the panel.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm talking from Ghana. Please, I want to know if there are some challenges that you face in your quest to becoming a conscious leader, and how do you deal with those as a young person growing up? And another question I would want to ask is that I'll use Ghana here political system to set a basis for the question. I realized that most of our leaders don't really face the real challenges that the people face, but they end up getting to the top of the positions, and even the few that understand the problems, once they get the position, like our laws are structured in a way that it gives them some privileges, and they tend to, like, they keep themselves away. They don't face our problems anymore. Yeah, so I want to know, looking at all these things as young people growing up, does it have a tendency of influencing us, that even growing up facing challenges, you know what people are going through, and that if you get a position or a leadership position, you are determined to change lives. And once you get there, there are privileges and things that keep you away from facing those challenges. And I just want to know whether we can be influenced by those things because we are seeing them happening. Yeah, so I don't know whether you can make that clear for me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. That's a really interesting point that you've raised. Maybe Dr. Gardner, we might pull you in on this question in terms of how do we support young people who see infrastructure and structures and systems in place where people have not necessarily the same lived experience as them, are experiencing lots of privilege or not experiencing the challenges of life. And how do you maintain being a conscious leader when you're given other leadership opportunities that may distract you from the core values of conscious leadership? So how do you maintain those values throughout your leadership journey?
Yes, Cameron, thank you so much. I'll go back to the topic. We're talking about conscious leadership. And I'll bring it down to remind us that an average human being lives 3 lives: your past life, your present life, and your future life. Many of us are held back on our past life. We feel that we come from less privileged families or we are inferior, that we cannot become anything. And that keeps on haunting us, and we tend to lose sight of what we're supposed to do. So we live in the nowness, but thinking about our inadequacies. As you started by giving us the book of Lenny Brown, and me, I will now want you to go out and read the book of Imperfection by Lenny Brown. We are imperfect, yes, but each and every one of us has a gift that we need to serve. And it's until you identify your gifts that you're able to give us. The challenge is we compare ourselves with other people. It doesn't matter where I come from. What matters, where I come from, is history. What matters is my vision. So am I able to unlearn, relearn, and learn? So this space, such spaces, give us the capacity, give us the vision, give us the hope that actually we are adequate and able to serve. So it's until you consciously realize that now the past of inadequacy and thinking, I come from a less to do family, I cannot handle this, I cannot handle that, then you lose it and become that of which you are supposed to. as long as you're going back to your authentic self, because that's what the world needs. Back to you, Cameron.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gardner. I think that's an excellent point for us to finish on in terms of being authentic to yourself. Unfortunately, folks, we have come to the end of this session. We don't want to keep people longer than we've said we will, but it's not over. There's so much more that we can do together and so much more space for us to collaborate. Next week, we have another webinar series at the exact same time, looking at global solidarity. As we said, this is a 6-week series. Next week, global solidarity. We move on to other topics afterwards, including ethical AI, participatory action research, storytelling, and youth-led social innovation. So there's loads more space for you to come and interact with us. I've asked you, if you have a question, please put it in the chat so that we can follow up on that question and ensure that your insights and your thoughts are included. I will hand over to my colleague John just very, very briefly and share this as I'm doing so, to just give a little bit of an insight into some of the impact reporting that we want to do for this webinar series. So hopefully you should be able to see this now. And John, it's over to you.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thank you for taking your time and participating in this webinar. We highly appreciate this. I just sent a link. If that message could be pinned. And then you can also use this QR code if you have a phone in your hand. But I also send the link for the survey. It just takes 5-6 minutes. We highly appreciate if you could just fill it out. This will help us to improve our results for the next time when we have different sessions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sean. And as a final word of thanks, I would like to thank our 4 speakers, Dr. Gardner, Aberduran, William, and Dua. Your insights have been really, really incredible on this particular topic. And I think I speak for the folks here that I've learned a lot, and we've learned a lot in terms of the space of conscious leadership. As you said, this is the beginning of the conversation. We thank the Panari organization, the Towers Network, Tisch College, and Tufts for their support of this webinar and ensuring that we can have these conversations. And we look forward to seeing you all next week at our Global Solidarity webinar.